You can wire a race car for very little money, and that's usually a bad idea. You can also wire a race car for a lot of money, and that is also a bad idea. Unless you have a lot of money, in which case, stop watching this video and go pay somebody else to do it. I found a pretty nice middle ground, the right wires, the right connectors, the right harness protection, all that at the intersection of reasonable cost and good enough quality. Which is good, because I am at the next item on my to-do list, which is, of course, wire the car. It's only 3 words, so it probably won't take very much time. It's probably super easy. In this video, I'm going to go over the correct best practices way of wiring a race car, and then I'm going to talk about the way that I did it. The first thing you need to know when wiring a car is to know where all the wires are coming from and going to. The good thing about a race car is that it's basically an engine with some metal connecting it to the wheels, so we don't have to worry about power windows or headlights or heated seats. In fact, the only thing not engine related that I have wired on this car is the fan that blows cool air into my helmet and the parachute button. But pretty much everything else goes to an input or output of the engine. So we start off by making a list of everything the engine wants or needs. Fuel injectors, coils, electronic throttle, about 50 sensors. The next part is figuring out where all the wires come from. Previously on this car, I was using a Megasquirt ECU. Megasquirt is a decent budget solution, but it hasn't been significantly updated in many years, and it's missing a lot of the capabilities that I want or need in my new turbo setup. I considered Motec, which I've used in the past, but they sell their ECUs with all this capability that's unlocked with different firmware packages, so you end up spending a bunch of money on a package that has 50 things even though you only want one thing out of it, or you get a development package and create your own firmware, which I absolutely do not have the desire or time to do. The best intersection of user-friendliness, capability, and cost that I found comes from a country in the South Pacific that may not actually even exist. I decided on Haltech, specifically the Nexus R3, and then I reached out to Haltech to ask if they wanted to support the build by sending me some hardware, and they did, which was convenient for me since I was going to buy it anyway. The first thing you need to know about Haltech is that it's not pronounced Haltech, it's Haltech. Apparently it was started by a guy named Hal. So me repeatedly saying it wrong would be like them calling my channel Superfast Hall. Unfortunately, I have been saying this wrong for years, so it is embedded deep into my brain and it's probably not coming out. But I will make some effort. Anyway, the Haltech doesn't have all the inputs or outputs I need for the car, so I'm piggybacking on a power distribution module. And I'm also adding a 7-inch dash so I can actually see my speedometer and temperatures while driving. With these 3, everything electronic on the car goes through the system, so it's not an engine control unit, but a vehicle control unit. This is all the inputs and outputs for the 3 devices. I spent some time sorting out all the connections where I thought they should go. The plan is to have the power distribution module at the front of the car, and the Nexus at the rear near the engine, so all the front controls can go to the PDM, and all the rear stuff can go to the VCU. I ended up pulling screenshots from the user manual for all the devices, and I assigned everything to a specific pin for the Nexus and the PDM and the dash, and also the driver controls. This seems like it would take a lot of time, and that's because it does. It took a while, which is weird because we're only doing 3 words, and we haven't even gotten to those words yet. We should do that. The first thing you need to do when wiring a car is to install all of the things that need wired, like the VCU and the PDM. I have a place for the Nexus in the back attached to the intercooler water tank. The PDM I eventually found a place for above the front water tank just behind the wheels. With these installed, the first thing I wanted to do is get them all talking to each other. The PDM requires one 4-gauge 12-volt cable coming from the battery and then a few smaller ground wires. It communicates with the VCU using CAN, and it knows to turn on when it gets 12 volts on the CAN connector. The Nexus gets its power and ground through 2 4-gauge cables. I ran the 12-volt through a kill switch that will be attached to a pull cable on the rear of the car. The dash is powered with a plug that also carries the CAN communication. Once I had the units powered up, I just had to remember how to connect and wire a CAN bus. And then I connected the computer and boom, everything showed up. Before I get to actually wiring the car, I want to assign all of the wires in the software. The software won't let you assign components to an input or output that it can't do. So this is a pretty good double check of all your wiring before you actually start wiring. There were a couple of things I had to change, like I had the throttle going to the PDM in the front of the car, but that actually needs to be wired directly to the main ECU, which kind of makes sense. This is all pretty straightforward. You go to the sections and select the things that you have on your setup, throttle by wire, boost control, whatever, and then each of those things gets a node on the tree below it. On that node, you select your preferred wire and any pertinent settings, and then you move on to the next one. At this point, I decided to wire up one sensor and check it, just to make sure. I wired up the front wheel speed sensor and had a friend spin the hub around. And Nothing happened. Then I checked the software and remembered that I needed to add in a calibration value. So we did it again, and success. First sensor wired. Basically done. It took me about a day to get the units powered up, to assign all the inputs and outputs, and to program in all the sensor curves. Again, this is all time consuming, even though all we are doing is 3 words. And we still haven't started on that. Let's do that. The first thing you need to do when wiring a car is to choose and purchase the connectors that you're going to use to connect all the wires together. Some stuff will already have connectors, OEM sensors and injectors and such, but you will need to add in connectors and purchase some sensors that you can get with different connector types. These are the best connectors. They're great, small, robust, easy to use. They're also really expensive. But if you want the fancy, expensive, correct way, then this is what you need. These connectors with a proper wiring harness, with heat shrink over the wires, surface loops at the ends, sealed boots on the connectors, labels everywhere. This is not my wiring harness. This is the wiring for Robin Schute's Pikes Peak race car. Connectors and other parts of a wiring harness are failure points. They can ruin a race. And when you're like Robin and you get one chance every year to run your race, you need to make sure everything is perfect. If I have a wiring problem while waiting in line, it's not the end of the world. I just go back to the pits and fix it and then get back in line. The amount of money and time you spend wiring a race car should be informed by the consequences of a wiring failure. I am stepping down a notch, but just one notch, not several notches. I'm going from perfect down to good enough. These are Deutsch DT connectors, and they are great. There are 3 sizes you can get: DTP, which is larger and handles up to 25 amps, DT, which can do 13 amps, and DTM, which are the smallest and can do 7.5 amps. They are relatively inexpensive at about 15% the cost of the fancy ones. They are all the same basic design, and the design is great. They're super easy to crimp, they're easy to assemble, and they're easy to unassemble, which comes in handy when you forget to add a loom or a label or something. Most good connectors will be usable with a boot, a rubber part that attaches to the back and adds strain relief to the wires. This is a great idea, and I should have done it in more than one place. You can heat shrink your own boot, and this is usually done with some adhesive squeezed in there. Some of your sensors will be these OEM type that have these connectors that I hate. The terminals crimp on, except for when they slip off, which is actually kind of nice because I always forget to put the little booties on there to seal the end of it. And oh yeah, sometimes they have to come in from the front. So you remember to add the seal and then the body, and then you realize you bought the terminals with the little tang on the wrong side, so you have to throw those out and reorder the correct ones, which are hopefully correct because there are like 7,000 different terminals out there. Some connectors will come with short wires, and my preferred way of dealing with these and my preferred way of connecting any 2 wires is to use a naked butt connector. And then I cover it with heat shrink. You can get butt connectors that have covers, but these are janky and not sealed and generally a bad idea. Naked butts is the way to go, and when you're wiring your car, you should be thinking about naked butts. Just remember to put the heat shrink on before you crimp it, and you also need to remember to put it on the correct side of a Y crimp. At some point in adding all of your connectors, you will realize you didn't CAD in the connector for one of your sensors, and now you have a frame tube welded right in the way. So you will need to get out a jigsaw and a welder and solve your problem with controlled violence. Wiring is really all about naked butts and violence. The first thing you need to do when wiring a car is to get wires. Fortunately, you can get the Nexus and the PDM with a harness, which I do recommend. If you need more wire, I've had good luck with both Wire Barn and also mil-spec wiring. GXL and TXL are your basic automotive wiring. TXL has a thinner sleeve, so it's less abrasion resistant, but it packages better and I use it for most things. I've started using Tefzel, which is this mil-spec wiring. It's a lot thinner and lighter and it's pretty durable, but it is more expensive. It's great if you're trying to keep your harness size and weight down. The Haltech software has a function where you can print out a list of every wire and what it's assigned to, and that makes the next part a lot easier. With the harness plugged in, you can start to go through and separate out your wires. Everything going to the engine can be bundled up in that direction. Everything going to the front can be bundled up in that direction. Every wire has a different color and stripe combination. The different functionalities share a base color and have a different stripe. All the colors are easily distinguishable except one. This stripe here, what color is that? If you said orange, you're wrong. And so was I, several times. It's brown. I kept making this mistake. This one is orange. Heh, just kidding. This one is red. This one is orange. When they're together, it's more obvious, but by itself, especially on the darker base colors, it's not. Anyway, watch out for that. The wires are all 8 feet long, which is more than I need for all but about 5 things. I did buy new wire and repin a few outputs to get the right length. I hate splicing together two different colors of wires. It's sloppy and it always leads to problems down the road. You can actually go into the software and redefine the color of the wires for any of the inputs or outputs so your pinout will still be correct. I use this expandable braided sleeving for wire protection pretty much everywhere. You can get it in a continuous spool for when you plan ahead and in a split sleeve for when you don't. I try to keep the functions bundled together so fuel injectors are all in the same loom and the coils are all in the same loom. I probably should have added heat shrink to the ends of the injector wires and then labeled each injector, but I can't get the connectors apart, so I'm not going to do that. The proper way to do this is to jacket all the cables with heat shrink that is made for this kind of thing. I don't do this for a couple of reasons. One is that it gets real expensive real fast, but mostly I don't do it because I've never had a wiring harness that hasn't changed 5 times. You can change a jacketed harness by changing the wire use or adding wires later, but I really want to be able to pull out wires and add new ones. You can also wrap wires in this tape. This is made for this kind of thing. I like to use this at the end of looms and at junctions. You can fix a lot of abrasion problems by just carefully constraining your wires as you go, and it does help if you're building something for land speed racing where your car will see an hour of total race time in its entire life. If you're endurance racing, you probably want to put more time into abrasion resistance and careful routing. Like I said, I got this VCU with a pre-made harness, which I recommend. There will probably be some wires that you don't need, and rather than just clipping them short, I suggest removing them. Any decent connector will have a feature to unlock the pins, and then you can just pull out the ones you don't need. All of this takes a lot of time. Every single wire needs to be routed to its home, preferably in a way that makes sense and doesn't get in the way of everything else, and be done in a way that makes it easy to service parts and pull the engine out without cutting anything. This will take several days, even though it's only 3 words. At least a day for each word. Probably more when you realize you forgot to order some connector or wire or something and have to wait a few days for that to arrive before continuing. But once everything has a wire going to it and everything is loomed and connectored, you are still not finished wiring the car. After it's all wired, I like to disconnect everything and then check each thing one by one. A lot of this stuff will be easy. Plug in your engine temperature sensor and check that reading. If it says whatever temperature is in your garage, you are good to move on to the next one. Inevitably, some of them will be calibrated wrong and some will be going to the wrong wires. After you get all the connectors plugged back in, you might find one that doesn't have anywhere to go. Is this extra? Did I change something and forget? You can look at the wire and then go back to your pinout list to see what's up. Or you can just assume it's probably fine. After that, the next step is to start the engine for the first time, but that comes later. Hit that subscribe button to come back and see if any of this stuff works. Thanks for watching.